All right. So today is a special treat. So you're joining us for the Overcome and Become podcast put on by the Better Me Nation. And I'm James Kevington. I'm the host. Grateful that you joined us today. If you're listening in or watching, if you're watching, you can see that I've got three young men here with me today. These are my sons. So I've got my son Matt, who's my oldest. Then there's Isaac. These are both grown men, college age boys. Isaac is married. Matt's getting married next week. And then
Exciting stuff.
Yep. And then we got Jacob, who is in junior high. So the reason we are together today is today's episode is we are talking about mental health. And there's been a lot of discussion in our local community about mental health, but it's also been a much more common conversation in the wellness world and at large because it's become a big issue, especially COVID revealed a lot of mental health issues and just kind of amplified them. And it created a need to have more discussions about it. And so in our family, we've had our fair share of mental health challenges and issues and things that we've been working through. And so we're going to talk about them. And the purpose of today is we really hope to, me as a father, I want to learn what I did wrong, right, in mental health and empowering my kids to have good mental health growing up, how I impaired it, what I did good, with the hopes of helping other fathers and moms too know what they can do now that we know differently. But also I want to normalize the discussions around mental health, and then especially among men. So I heard a statistic yesterday that 78% of suicides are committed by men. So that's a very disproportionate number, right? When you compare the genders. And so that's a big deal. And then also suicide rates are on the rise in every category, whether it be senior citizen men, which is actually the number one category of suicide as senior citizens due to loneliness, but also among our youth and teens. And so obviously there's a lot of big mental health challenges facing us. And I want to start the conversation in my own family. And so today we're gonna talk about things. And as I set the ground rules with my kids, I basically said nothing's off limits in talking about me, our past, our history. They can ask me questions. We kind of, in preparation for this episode, we talked about an outline, but that's it. So I could be totally blindsided by stuff that I did as a naive young father or as an experienced older father yesterday. Who knows?
It's all unscripted.
It's 100% unscripted. So, a little bit about our family. We're pretty close. So in this episode, there may be random acts of humor and poking fun and making fun. See, Jacob's already laughing because he's thinking like 20 things he can mock me about right now. Yeah. And so, so he's taking deep breaths. He's like, I'm glad Dad taught me deep breathing.
Needless to say, we're happy to be on the podcast, though. Yeah. We're privileged. What do you say, Jacob?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what podcast episode number 2 for you?
Number 3.
This is number 3.
Number 3.
Big fan. I listened to number 1. That was a banger, but gotta listen to number 2. So
yeah. Well, I will give you some leeway because you get married.
Yeah.
You're in school. What's your excuse?
In school.
Yeah. I'm currently married.
Currently married. Oh, and a new puppy, which is like having a baby.
Kind of.
It's like having a baby.
Well, he has a
Jacob's
baby
in
that
junior
already is
high.
potty trained. He knows how to go to the bathroom and the toilet. So.
And Jacob's in junior high, so he just doesn't care.
Fair enough.
All right, in all reality, I feel super privileged to be on here, and like I think with the conversations we're gonna have today are gonna affect a ton for not just only your mental health, but for physical health, for spiritual health, and for all health around. I feel like when it comes to talking about mental health, this is something that impacts every part of your life and every stage of your life. And so whatever the viewer is trying to get out of this when it comes to either they're on a weight loss journey or they're on a journey to better connect with their spiritual side or better connect with their emotional and social side, or even just deal with mental health problems themselves, I think this podcast will be super useful for them.
Yeah. and also how those things impact our mental health too, right? We're gonna talk about those things too. All right, so to set a baseline, I just want to put out there that there are this is not completely accurate from a clinical side, but from just like a practical, common everyday. There's two sides to mental health, right? There's the mental health where we're debilitated and we need help, right? We need like professional guidance, help, maybe even hospitalization too, right? I've had friends be hospitalized because they needed it, right? And then there's the mental health where it's like, which is the most common, but unaddressed, it leads to where we become debilitated, right? So if you're listening or watching and you feel like you can't exist right now or that you can't perform like just daily tasks, get help. It's all right. I've been there. Matt's been there.
Yeah.
We've all been there, right? And so it's just go ask for help. It's no different than if you were to break a bone, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, my body's supposed to self heal. I'm going to let this self heal. Like, you wouldn't do that. That's not normal. That's awkward. Well, our mental health is the same way, right? Like if you've got a broken issue, fix it. Go get like it's okay to do that, right? So in the notes to this, I'll put some numbers and places you can call, but please take care of that, right? So let's define mental health. I'm gonna read this, right? So three things, right? One, it's our ability to face adversity and challenges and maintain a positive mindset and emotional well-being despite setbacks and stressful situations. So how well do we do that, right? How well we regulate, control, and give space to the emotions we have, and then reframe negative experiences or setbacks as opportunities for growth and learning instead of personal failures. And I think that probably is the most common form of like impacting our mental health are those narratives that we talk about. So Jacob, right? When you're young, right? When you hear narratives, what is that? What do you think? Like when someone says, "What are the narratives that you tell yourself?" What are you thinking?
Well, I just think of English.
You think of English?
Like,
Okay.
oh man, I have to do homework.
Okay, I have to do homework. Okay, all right. So in the stage of like mental health, Isaac, what do you hear when you say, what are the narratives that you tell yourself? What do you think? What does that mean to you?
Just what's going on inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the number one thing.
Yeah, what's going on inside? So there's a lot. So what are some of the common narratives, Matt, that go on in your head? And you can share, like, so we're going to I'm going to invite to share not only what's current, but also like what was going on in high school, what was going on in junior high or even grade school, and now as an adult, right? And then for Jacob,
Yeah.
what's going on now, right?
When I think it comes to narratives, like in my mind, a narrative is just like a story you tell yourself what's going on inside, as Isaac said. And I think, like in different stages of life and throughout the different processes of like learning to overcome your mental health issues and struggles and problems, like there's a lot of different stories you're gonna have to tell yourself and a lot of stories that you do tell yourself, right? So for me, most recently, a mental health, like a really big mental health crisis I went through is I was in a water polo game a couple months ago where it was like toward the end of school, we're getting ready for finals and everything, and went and played a water polo tournament over the weekend, and unexpectedly I got elbowed in the back of the head twice and then a big punch to the face after that. And that put me in a really severe concussion, which I've had concussions before, but none like that. And my mental health, like just by nature, just went straight up down the drain. And there's a lot of narratives going on in my mind of like, I'm just a broken person. It's a false story that I told myself. It's a false narrative that I told myself where it was just constantly going through my brain. Like, I'm a broken person. I'm just constantly broken. And like, although there might be some truth to that, I've like chopped up my knee and broken my arm, broken my ribcage. Like, we all have injuries and such, but it was a false narrative. I kept telling myself like I'm a broken person, And there's other false narratives of life is just constant pain. Life is just constant suffering. And when you tell yourself false narratives like that, it just puts you down a really bad rabbit hole. Like, well, what's the point? What's the point of living? What's the point of moving forward if life is just constantly broken, if life is just constantly pain? And I think we do that in a lot of ways. Like, you know, Jacob gets braces and maybe some girl makes fun of him at school, and now he's just telling himself, I'm ugly. Nobody likes me, right? And like, it sounds goofy, but we oftentimes do that. We oftentimes do that to ourselves. And a good therapist once told me, I remember telling him some of my issues and some of the things I told. He was trying to get those narratives out of me and trying to help me become aware of those narratives. And something he helped me to kind of be aware of when it came to speaking of false narratives to yourself, because we all do it. We all say things about ourselves that aren't true. He said, now if your friend, he asked me like, who's your best friend? And I was like, oh, my best friend's Dylan. And he's like, well,
By the way, that just broke all of our hearts.
I know, I'm sorry.
we all want to be
That's my best friend. No, these guys are my best friends too. But you know, I was talking like, oh, like my best friend's Dylan. He's like, okay, well, with Dylan, if Dylan came to you and said, hey, I was struggling with such and such, and I just feel really bad, and I messed up in this, and life is just really hard, and I'm just a complete loser. You know, what would you tell Dylan in that moment? I said, well, I'd tell him like, no, you're not a loser. Here are all these awesome things you're doing. Here's the kind of person you are. You're amazing. Like, this is a rough time, and sure, you have your mess ups and you have your mistakes, but let's get through this. Like, I'm here for you, man. Like, then why don't you tell it to yourself? Why can't you say those positive things to yourself? When you mess up, when you have hard times, why are you so harsh on yourself? And that was a big awakening for me, and learning how to better address and understand my personal narrative. So yeah, that's a great question.
How does that narrative, and any of you guys can chime in on this, because it can just be about anything that's going on in our head, but how does what we do as a family feedback? So when you say broken, I think you're alluding to like that you always get hurt.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, honestly, in our family, like, sometimes we point that out to you.
Oh yeah,
Right?
totally. Like anytime Jacob comes crying to you, it's like, what did Matt do?
So how do you reconcile that we're not, or do you, that what family might be saying to you, or what, Isaac, you can chime in, Jay, you can chime in, what we're saying to you isn't part of it. How does that feed the narrative, and are you able to separate that from your narrative as not relevant? Because I know I've had a hard time with that. Like, I'll never forget, I love my family, my siblings and my parents, but once when I was probably like in the 5th grade, my sister had a 10-speed bike. I went to borrow it. She said, you can't borrow my bike, you break everything. That's the only time she ever said that to me. But for whatever reason, James took that for the rest of his life. And it became this issue where I break things. Like, I'm not responsible. I'm not capable of having something nice without breaking it. So I became afraid to have stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Jacob?
Yeah.
Are there any things that family members say that feed narratives in your head? Or you want to think about that or comment later? Or I mean,
carefully.
I'm giving my kids permission to not answer questions because some of these things can be uncomfortable, and being authentic and transparent is not always easy for everyone. So
Not really. I mean,
what about I know the last school year was hard, and we can maybe talk about that later on a different topic, but we always say, Jacob, you're the smart one.
Yeah.
Now that's a positive thing. You would think that saying you're one in the family is a positive thing, and it is a positive thing, right? It's a compliment. But what did that do for your mental health when it came to academic performance?
drove it to, just to the floors.
You drove it to the floor?
It's just kind of like
I was already here.
Just
It
kidding.
just, like, messed with it. It just made it horrible because my academic performance, yeah, it was good, but it just wasn't what I wanted it to be because I was the smart one.
What did that do to your self-esteem once your grades were going down, but you felt like you had to perform and be the smart one? How did that make you feel?
Not good at all. Like, it's messed with me. It messed with my whole world. It's just,
So even positive comments, right?
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the danger there that I've learned, just through learning and stuff, is that we were focused on, like, say you're the smart one, like actions versus effort. Like we're talking about results, right? But when we start talking about effort, so we had to talk about effort one night, right? How did that make you feel when I started complimenting your effort versus your actual academic accomplishments?
I mean, like, it made me feel better, but, like, I don't know, I've just always been told I'm the smart one since.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's not an overnight fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Isaac? How has family fed into some narratives that you told yourself?
I don't know. I feel like I'm the most positive one here. I
I
don't
would
really
agree with that. I would agree with that.
Isaac's very optimistic.
I don't think I take things personal
No.
like the rest of you. I think the one thing was I coached water polo and I coached Jacob. We went to Junior Olympics and I was attacked by my dad and my brother
Yeah,
as
it's true we were.
as their son and brother and as a coach. And
Yeah.
I was just blindsided. And I was like, I didn't do anything wrong. My dad coached me and he made me sit on the bench for 10 years before I got to even play. And here's one tournament and he sat on the bench for half the game and I'm getting attacked, So I think that was just one thing that was just like, so every time he sits on the bench, I get attacked,
So how does that shape? So we have an interesting family dynamic in that I used to coach a club, so I have like this sense of ownership, even though I don't anymore. You're now the coach. You guys have all played for me. Now you're coaching your brother, right? How does that play into your as a coach now? Like,
Well, I keep it separate. Coaching is coaching and son is brother son, right? I don't want to mix the two. And, when you both come to me as the coach and brother son, it's like, that's not what I want. Right? You wouldn't approach the coach like that. Your brother or son like that makes me in a I am the coach.
yeah,
And I make the right decisions for the team in the heat of the moment versus,
right.
Yeah.
like,
And I think that's good advice for a lot of the audience to, recognize, like, because most families, it's not just your family life and then your work and school and sport life. It's like, no, most families, it's all combined, just like it is for us. And so I think your approach of learning how to, well, first of all, like, just separate it. Like when I'm in school, I'm in school. When I'm in work, I'm in work. When I'm with family, I'm with family. And like, to learning how to not take things personal, I think it's also important to what you're doing right now, simply communicating these things and saying, hey, this is something that like is as a brother and as a son, let's communicate versus, hey, let's like talking to me as a coach. Because talking to you as a coach, as a water polo coach, is very, very different than talking to you as a brother.
well, even if I was not their brother or son, would they have talked to me like that?
Yeah, and oftentimes you don't do that, right? Oftentimes it's like we'll go up to our, if your brother's your water polo coach, oftentimes like you'll whine to him as if he's your brother, even as your coach. But if he was your coach, you would have never whined like that, Yeah.
I don't feel like we ever did that to Dad when he coached us.
Oh no, there was definitely times where I did that. How many times?
Maybe
No,
him, not
dude,
me.
Isaac was maybe a little bit better at it, but how many times were we in the pool and I just hated your reffing so much, would yell at you from the pool, being like, Dad, your ref sucks, like bad call, like no, call this.
Yeah.
And it was just like no one would have ever talked to a coach like that. But I think because you were my dad, I took advantage of you. And it wasn't necessarily intentional, but it was just like I'd get super frustrated and just be like, no.
You
And
also
that
have to realize you're
attention.
extra intense and aggressive, and you do things that you don't realize.
Oh yeah, no,
You
totally. My aggression totally gets the worst of me
That
sometimes.
hurts other people as well. Yeah.
It does, yeah.
What I really liked about Isaac in that situation is that you did call me out and you say, Dad, I feel attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You didn't say Jacob attacked me, Mom attacked me, you attacked me.
Mom's the only one that loves me.
Mom is the only one that loves you. No. What you said was, I feel attacked, right? And those are really good words, right? I think oftentimes, especially when kids are young, you say, Matt hit me in the face, instead of I feel hit in the face, right? There's different things, right? Or Matt did this to me, or Matt, and oftentimes it's our interpretation of the event that happened to us, not the actual events, right? So I thought that was really, and I would agree. I think you are probably the more positive and more objective person in the family, and less likely to have an emotional response.
I don't really speak out on things. I just let it happen and then just go on.
Well, and that comes with his consequences too, because sometimes I feel like it's just like, oh, he's not taking things seriously. He doesn't care.
But yeah, that's
And like,
sure. I just go out of my own way.
Yeah, you just go out of your own way. That's a narrative that's false as well, right? Like, like there were just several times where it was like, maybe we're having like this heated, like maybe I get super into things as I'm super aggressive, as you noted, and maybe I'll get in this super heated argument or be really mad about something. But for Isaac, it's just like, oh, I don't care, whatever, let it happen, let it do its thing. And that's Isaac's way of being peaceful and being happy and just taking a positive outlook on it, which is awesome. But in my narrative as a high schooler, just like, oh, Isaac doesn't give a crap. Isaac doesn't care,
Yeah.
And so I just think there's lots of different consequences to different actions. But at the end of the day, if you can learn to disassociate those narratives with people and just love each other above all other things, that matters most for sure.
How does Isaac? You say you're a little bit quiet sometimes.
I don't know if quiet's the word.
Well, you're not quiet, but you're more reserved in your comments and stuff, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of great strengths to that, but with any great strength, there's also like the flip side. Do you ever feel like you don't have a voice, or that your voice matters less, or that you have less influence? Like, by the way, these are questions. I don't know the answers to these.
No, we haven't talked about it.
I wouldn't say that my voice doesn't matter. I would say I'm more of not a backseat driver. I'd normally like to take the driving spot.
Yeah.
And just lead. But I would say when in situations, I would see all perspectives versus one and go with it. Right? You, Dad, and Matt go off the high of the emotions.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And me and Jacob don't. We kind of wait, talk to everyone else, and see what's actually the case, and then just move on.
Do you feel like you've ever suppressed your voice or suppressed your perspective?
No, I don't feel like you guys have. I just me personally, I like to not say what I always have in my head. And
why is that?
I don't know. I just don't care
I think
what people think.
Okay.
Because Isaac is more thought through. I think he's not quite like you say. To me, it more feels like his opinions actually matter more, and they should be taken to account more because he has less you get what I'm saying.
He doesn't throw around his voice like Matt and I do. So
Yeah.
when he does speak, it's kind of like the trees in that one movie. Anything worth saying is worth saying.
Yeah, I don't like arguments. I don't like fighting. I mean, if someone wants to fist fight me, I'll win. That's probably what will happen. But I'm not the one that's going to start it. I'll just wait. And
so for everyone listening or watching, me and Matt just heard challenge accepted.
Last time we all fought, I beat you, and Matt, you wouldn't let me wrestle Matt, but you beat Matt, so therefore I
That's
beat
not
Matt. That's
The problem of being age and my personality, the boys like a few months ago, like, and I'm like, okay, like, I'm gonna figure, but I can't say no.
Like,
And Jacob's like, I'll get the chips and dip. I'm out.
It's like,
But, like,
They give me 5 years and then I'm in.
you need more than that. But.
hey.
I mean, I might get in trouble for this, but Sammy, my wife, she is total opposite. She's like, why didn't you say anything? Go do this. I'm like, I just don't care. And her whole family is like, as soon as something happens, like, I gotta go do something about it. But I'm like, let's just kind of wait, see what actually is gonna happen, see what is the real outcome, because the real outcome comes later on most of the time, not there in the moment, right? Like, if the waiter gives her the wrong food, she'll be like, I got the wrong food, go do something about it. I'm like, well, what if he'll realize it in 5 minutes and now we're,
You can avoid the conflict that way.
You can avoid the conflicts, you can avoid the awkwardness or the waiter, feeling bad, right? Worrying about other people's feelings. And I feel like that's something most people don't do.
Yeah.
They just act on what is there in the moment.
Very impulsive.
And our world has gotten so, like, if it doesn't happen in 2 seconds, I'm going to lose it, right? If our computer takes 5 seconds long to load, it's like, what's going on? I got to go unplug the Wi-Fi and plug it back in, when in reality, it just, in my head, it's a computer. Like, our Wi-Fi at our place right now is not fast, and she's like, go call him. And I was like, well, it might come back later. I don't know. I don't care. Like, why do I have to call him? Just, it's spotty, but it's not a big deal. But that's just how I go about,
Has it always been natural to you, or do you feel like that there was experiences where you just realized it's not worth being like this? I should just be more patient.
I feel like that's more natural to me. I feel like as of now, I'm being more forced to say and do things.
Why is that? Because of this conversation, or because of
No, not in this moment. Like, in life in general, I think it's just because of who I'm married to, right? And that's not a bad thing.
But you're also in a lot of transition stages too, right?
Yeah, like, it's not a bad
You
thing.
recently moved. You're doing a career transition. There's a lot of things you're figuring out.
Yeah, and we're not, like, I don't regret marrying Sammy. It's not a bad thing that she's making me do things. It's good, right?
Yeah.
It definitely helps.
Well, it balances out. It's going to make you
Yeah,
better. The fact that
it's not a bad thing.
it's almost like a different tool that you can add to your tool belt. Like, you have the tool belt of resolving problems by avoiding the conflict and by waiting things out. But now you're going to have to your tool belt the ability to appropriately speak up and appropriately say, "Hey, this needs to change when appropriate," right? Like,
yeah,
and there's different
it's
things
the
for
same
different
thing,
times.
right?
So
'Cause there's consequences to all actions, but there's bad consequences. And I go about the same thing with rules. Like, if I break a rule, I'm just like, oh, let's just wait to see what's going to happen. Versus, like, oh, I should probably say or do something about it, right? And so that's another thing that is helpful in what I've been learning with Sammy. But yeah, there's just different consequences to things,
How do you manage that whenever we're forced to do something uncomfortable or become uncomfortable with personal growth? We have like these fears.
Mm-hmm.
How is that like? By the way, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I just one of the most fearless guys I know. In terms of just like courage and willingness, he's a lot like my wife and mom, who just has the ability to go out and just do, right? But I don't know that on the outside it looks like you're just like Wonder Dog, like, oh, I'm a dog with superpowers now. I can go fly. Ooh, I'm gone, But is that how it is on the inside? Especially when you're, especially when you're being forced by it out of your comfort zone.
I would say it's similar.
Yeah.
Up to the point until it's happening, I'm like, well, now what are the risks, right? Right before it happens, I'm like, now what can happen? So, like, I'll get up and I'll go do things, and I'll run the business, and then I'm like, oh, well, now this and this can happen after I'm already in it and it's too late. I don't really go over the risk. I kind of just go about it. I'm like, okay, I I'm pretty sure I can do it.
So how do you deal with the fallout of making bad decisions? Because
Uh,
like
I'm very persuasive.
when you don't when you don't like consider the risk,
Yeah.
and then the worst case scenario happens, how do you deal with that relationship side
I
of
feel
it?
like I'm pretty good under pressure.
Okay.
I feel like I can and I'm not trying to be cocky or anything.
No, you're super
But
arrogant. No, I'm just kidding.
but I feel like just naturally, I understand how to react under pressure and just like what would be the best option in the situation if the worst case scenario comes. Like I can just go and do it, and it's not like I have to think about it. It's more of like my body is taking over, and then after I'll be like, what did I just do? You know, and then it worked out. That's just how I feel.
Question for you on that. And I think this might relate a little bit to some of the audience members, but because this is definitely something that like I've struggled with. But how do you feel like you take things on when you make a mistake or get called out for a specific mistake that you made?
Yeah,
How do you feel like you deal with the mistakes that you
I don't
make?
mind getting called out. I don't really care. I mean, I guess it depends on what I'm getting called out for. But when I make a mistake or get called out, it's mostly like, okay, what now can I do to overcome that and learn from it? It's more of like a learn to grow kind of situation is what those are. Because if you've noticed, I don't really make the same mistakes other people do. I kind of like, and that comes.
You definitely make different ones.
I make different mistakes, yeah. But like for me, sitting aside for a little bit, not caring about what people think, I learn a lot and watch a lot of what people do and mistakes they learn, and I try not to make those mistakes. And I feel like that definitely
you are really good at observing and learning from
those
others.
situations. So.
Yeah. What about like with like really like big mistakes in life? Like how do you feel like you process that and take that mentally, internally?
Just beg. Just kidding. I don't. The same thing I go about everything else. I don't really. I don't care.
I think that's pretty
Like,
insightful especially on the narrative side and that personal growth side. I know there's some other areas that we'll dive into deeper. Isaac's not this perfect human being.
No, I'm not by any means.
And I'm going to expose a couple of those things. Not like on it's not a character issue or a competence issue. It's a human being issue, right?
Yeah.
And so I just want to like a couple of things that I heard yesterday in the podcast. Like if you for those listening or watching, I have like my podcast crush is Andrew Huberman from the Huberman podcast. He's doing a mental health series, and the guy he's interviewing, I forget the gentleman's name, but he says we say things to ourselves, depending on your age and how long it's been, 500,000, 10,000, 100,000 times. Like me, like you break things. And you think one therapy session of I'm a problem solver is going to erase that narrative? It's like it's not going to erase it. Like it's not going to be overnight. And we live in this, like I think one of you guys brought up, like we live in this quick fix world. Yeah, where we want these immediate results. Overcoming narratives can take decades. It's work. It's hard, right? So I just want to throw that out to people that these narratives are real. Jacob, before we leave this topic of narratives, you're in junior high.
Yeah.
There's a lot of social narratives, and you guys can speak to this from high school and junior high. The social narratives are what we're supposed to be, not just family narratives, but social narratives. Like I know Isaac had this narrative, and because we talked about this, Dad, I want this brand of shoe, or Matt saying, Dad, I want this kind of sock. That did not come from our house because Kat and I, we are not driven by like the clothing or brand awareness.
Yeah, we got our hand-me-downs from our uncles.
Yeah. So, but then you go to school, and you would have these narratives around appearance. And Jacob, you belong in some academic circles.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's narratives around intelligence.
Yeah. You don't have the best calculator.
I really don't. I don't have a calculator.
You are the calculator. No, but how do those social narratives feed into your beliefs about yourself?
One of something that was like said a lot about me was I'm like, oh, you're the really short kid,
Oh,
because I was like in the middle of like tall and short.
yeah,
I wasn't like average, but I was
Yeah.
between average.
below average,
yeah, I was below average. But if they were to call the actually short people short, it'd be offensive to them. So I was always called short. It was like me and one other person because we were just right there.
Yeah.
So, being called short is just like often like a lot. It starts to hurt.
Yeah.
Like a lot. So yeah, like
How
it's
does-
just
What about name calling hurts?
well, it's like I don't say it's name calling. Name calling is like different, but I feel like that is just like just even if like you're like, oh, you're the tall person, like being stereotyped is something that like you like my name is Jacob, like I'm Jacob, I'm not the short kid, that's just like I don't want to be known as the short kid.
Yeah. So let's bring that to home. You go to school, you've been called the short kid.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm hearing this.
Really?
I know well, yeah.
It's like, Dad, I tell you every day. I'm sad 'cause I get picked on for being the short kid at school.
I know it's come up, right?
Kidding.
Yeah.
But I've never felt like it's come up in terms of
Sorry, but
I'm feeling hurt, I'm
Yeah.
feeling sad. It's come out as like I hate them for calling me short.
Yeah.
Right? No, like it really has.
Well, and
So-
it's hard because I know it's hard to say on camera, but we're all 6'2", and and you're
no, it's not true.
None of us are that tall. Isaac's definitely not that tall.
Isaac's like
Jacob just
5'2".
whispers to Isaac like 5'3".
But so you come home and you carry that. How often have you felt like I want to download to my dad? Didn't.
Not very often. I just
Okay, no, that's
No,
good.
it's good. It's like
No, that's good. Why? What? So have you felt like you can come to me with stuff like that?
Yeah.
What have I done to create that atmosphere?
Stuff like this where we're doing the podcast. We are a pretty tight family. We have. I know you guys like to have like family dinners, and I like that too because we just get to see each other. And now that we have like a freaking huge family, it's it's weird having so many people at the house, and I don't know. It's just that you like the family that I have. I love all of them. Like there's not a single one person that I'm like I don't like them. It's like
So being together when we do those family dinners or a couple nights a week, we'll just like I know at the end of the night we like to kind of before we get ready for bed. Sometimes we'll just like talk.
Yeah.
You feel like that's helped you?
Yeah.
Has there been times where you're like, he's not listening to me, I'm out?
there's been times I felt that way. So like I think you're like and just to be,
I'm a totally
just to
different
be
dad.
super frank, you've changed so much as a parent. Like back when I was in high school, I just felt like you're on your computer all the time. And then even when you were listening to us, it was like you're just listening to us, but while on your computer.
one year out the other.
And
yeah.
like
one-
and the other things I felt like I could never like.
Hold on.
Yeah,
What, say that one more time. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I just kind of felt like, oh, is he really listening, right? And it just never felt like you were, and so I didn't want to come to you with a lot of my problems, and I knew you were always open, and you were never the kind of parent to shy away from problems. You're never the kind of parent to avoid problems. But from our perspective, it's been a lot different than Jacob because
I
you've
wasn't
changed.
present.
You weren't as present. No, I think a lot of that had to do with your physical health as well. Your physical health wasn't what it is at now. You're a lot more aware and awake. Your brain's a lot more mentally active, and your body's it's a little bit more alive, honestly. And before it was just like we knew you were always there for us, willingly, but physically and mentally no. And it was just like that was kind of hard for a lot of our time in high school. And like, I think it's super, super important, especially for like all the audience. Like if you're, parenting kids and like just simply being able to listen matters a ton for their kids' mental health. And like, in our day and age, like you have no clue what anybody could be struggling with. Like the super happy, positive kid could be going through a total mental crisis right now, figuring out whether or not he wants to kill himself.
Yeah.
And you never know. And so being able to just be there and be present with your kids and have an opening ear to them is going to make a big impact in their lives. Now, I think like, we did the best under the circumstances we had and everything, and we tried our hardest. But yeah, I think your parenting style now and you being a little bit more, not necessarily your parenting style, but just who you are now, is you improved in your ability to communicate and be opening and be present with us, for us to be able to actually come to you with problems. Whereas I felt like back when we were in junior high and high school, like that wasn't as prevalent, for sure.
You agree with that, Isaac?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really go to people with my problems.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know, I'm more of a sweep it under the rug kind of guy.
More like a what?
Sweep
Sweep it under the rug.
Oh, yeah.
Every now
And
and then,
that comes with its consequences.
every now and then I
too,
trip
but-
over the rug, but it's, I don't know. I just, I feel like forgiveness is easier than talking it out for me. Like,
Yeah.
I just, like, for instance, I surprised my wife with the puppy, and she was very mad, and I was like, well, in my head, as I was driving an hour away to pick it up, I was like, what are going to be the consequences? And I was like, I can handle that, right? And now she doesn't care. She couldn't tell you what she was mad about anymore, right?
I will say, you can only do that when your relationship has a good foundation, and you can't do that all the time. Like, you can surprise her with something else today, and then something else in a month from now. Eventually, she's gonna be like, Isaac, we gotta fix something. Right?
Yeah, like, she hates surprises, and I like to give them.
And see, that's another part of our family that like I wasn't brought to awareness of it until after like I was living out on my own. But like, for whatever reason in this household, we just do surprises. It's funny. Like,
Really?
some other people don't. Like, yeah, think about every Father's Day and Mother's Day, we know what's coming. We know there's gonna be a breakfast in bed, but we still like to be secretive about it. Like, oh, Mom can't know that we went to the grocery store. We gotta buy strawberries and pancake mix. But it's just like, wait a second, why do we do surprises? And so
it's
for other
super
families,
weird.
that's
Like,
hard.
my wife's family versus our family, we go Christmas shopping the day before Christmas, and we don't get anything on sale, and we pay the high price for it, and so we only get one thing. But my wife's family, my mother-in-law probably already has over half our gifts bought.
And it's what?
It's
September.
Speaking of surprises,
there are no surprises. We know what our presents are.
yeah. So because our family does like surprises, I'm just gonna say this right now. This is gonna be a surprise for you guys. Well, at least for Jacob. So parents out there, if you've got young children, you might want to close their ears. There's gonna be a spoiler alert. There's no Santa Claus, Jacob. Okay. It's me. No. All right. Going back to like being present. Sometimes I think it's good to hear what was going on, right? And have an understanding. So just for our dialogue, this is us personally. I would give this advice to other parents to have this conversation. I learned this actually from Jay-Z, right? Jay-Z was on a podcast talking about his mental health and just understanding where other people were coming from. But sometimes you have to ask and have that dialogue. I felt that because I was not financially in a place I wanted to be, I felt like I had to be working nonstop to show that I cared.
Yeah.
That I was trying to be that provider.
Yeah, like how many years were you unemployed?
It was a long time that I was self-employed / unemployed, just trying to do whatever I could to put food on our table. And I felt like if I wasn't showing that effort, the lack of money needed to be replaced by effort. and that was how I showed my responsibility. Right. That's what I was trying to do. I'm still not in a place where like I feel like I'm financially free, but I've learned that working myself to death inhibits my ability to actually create that financial freedom.
Yeah.
And in turn, I've learned now I can actually be present with my kids and have experiences with them.
Do you feel like you could have been more time sensitive? Like, did you feel like you would just randomly do stuff to make others feel like you were actually doing something?
Yeah.
So do you feel like
I would still feel like today, like we have a family that we're supporting that's a refugee family, and I leave the house to work remote instead of working from home because I feel like if I don't, she's gonna think I'm lazy,
Interesting.
and I don't want to be perceived as being lazy. And so instead of working from my home office, I'll go work from Starbucks.
Yeah.
Because I fear what people think about me.
Yeah.
I think everyone does secretly.
I think those fears limit us in a lot of ways, but we all have fears, every single one of us.
I mean, and there's also something good to that. It's like you can't just be walking around the streets wearing nothing but a Speedo. Like,
Even though we have
Even
done
though we
it.
have done
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, we
That's
use
water
that example,
polo
but that's not a good example with this family. Like,
Yeah.
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 No, it's true though. Like there's certain things that like it's good
You
to
have to
be
think
it's
about
good to
the
be
people.
afraid about. It's good to be afraid of certain consequences, or else like if I had no fear of touching a hot stove, then because of the consequence of burning my hand, then it's just like certain fears are going to help you. But I think when those fears limit you in your decisions, that's when the fear takes control of your decisions, that's when it's out of control in my mind. Like you should be aware of your fears, see them for what they are, but not make decisions based off of those fears.
Right. So let's kind of move on to stress and anxiety. And this is an area where I know that Isaac has not managed it well in some cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, not going to go into the details, but you had a job. Well, you've had a lot of jobs with a lot of stress and anxiety, right? I mean, you worked in kitchens, right? In the culinary industry, you've had some other industries. And I think that you and I have, in this area, we've actually shared some responses that are not conscious, not like deliberate responses, but like not able to sleep, right? Like, so when you've got anxiety or stuff, like you had one position where you just weren't sleeping at night, right?
Yeah.
And I remember like when I got laid off in 2010, I was having nightmares a lot, right? Like it was, for whatever reason, not dealing with it in a healthy way came to haunt me in my sleep. This is really fresh for you. You still may be in the process of understanding yourself, which I think you probably are, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Talk about like how coping with the anxiety is. Like, what are you doing now that you know is not working?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, because there's probably an easier answer. Right?
Working that job, making what I made, is not good, right?
Why do you say that? Why? Because you tied the money to the job.
Yeah, because I feel like if you pay me something to do a job, I'll do it. But it's got to be enough, right? If you pay me to teach one kid how to play water polo, you don't really have to pay me a lot. But if you pay me to run a whole car dealership, which I was, all by myself, driving across the country unpaid, right? That comes with different consequences. I would have put up with more of his crap, right? And I think that comes with.
But was that even healthy? Like,
yeah. So like with my personality and not sharing what I'm feeling, or sharing of what I want to say, right? That was some of the consequences of the stress building up and just the urge to be done.
Yeah.
Right. And I think now I just don't care about them anymore. Like And I don't feel like I'm doing anything now that doesn't, like.
What would you do differently? Like, I don't want to talk specifics because you've had lots of jobs since you've been out of high school.
Mhm.
But like, how would you manage things differently? Like at the kitchen when they were, because you worked at a few kitchens,
Yeah.
like where they're demanding like 60-hour weeks, where you're working
Yeah,
like 12-hour
so
shifts.
yeah, when I was at Benihana, I was doing 80-hour weeks, and I was that as soon as I got engaged, I was like, all right, I should not be in the culinary industry anymore, right? Because
But if you were in the culinary industry still, how would you change either your perspective or your responses to things to be more mentally healthy?
I don't know if there is a way you can change that, because with the restaurant industry, it's like you just
So you can change how you respond to people. Like the
Yeah.
restaurant industry notoriously has crappy managers,
oh yeah,
Right.
every single restaurant does, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Restaurants have very low margins. The people who make money have multiple restaurants, and it's a volume thing, not a
Yeah.
right, not a margin thing. So the people aren't paid well, right?
Yeah.
And so their talent pool is from people who are willing to like. That's just generic. Some restaurants fantastic, right? It's not always the same. So, but your response to that can change.
Yeah, I would say that the response that I should have made is just being. I don't really. It's hard to say because there. I don't really have a response. I don't think I would have done it differently.
How would you do it differently now, though?
Well, I just said I wouldn't have done it differently.
Oh, okay.
I think that I've learned a whole lot
Yeah.
from all of those experiences. Like throughout all of high school and after high school, I wanted to be in the restaurant industry until I met my wife. And at that happened, I was like, all right, I'm just gonna learn what I can because I didn't want to go to school. Right, culinary school is expensive; you'll never be able to pay it off. So I felt like learning. I was at several restaurants, just learning what I could, and I wouldn't really take that back. But what I would take back is, I would just say, I don't know. I actually don't know if I would take anything back.
What advice would you give to Jacob if he's like, I'm going to go work as a white line and
It
high
should be
school, I'm going to
don't.
go work in the kitchen? What advice would you give to him?
No,
In
because you're gonna
terms
give
of-
him food
In terms of the
poisoning.
relationship side, not
Yeah.
the work side, not
Yeah,
work advice.
I mean, 90% of the people who work in the kitchens are not from the United States. They're from somewhere else.
So what does that mean on a mental health level?
And
Learn to speak.
no, I would say learning from them from what they've done already, because we live in such a different world,
Yeah.
right? I worked with a guy at Little America who served in the Vietnam War, and he was like 95 years old, but he was still working in the kitchen because he had just moved here like 10 years prior, and he's like, I have to work. But he was also like the most awesome employee because he had to, even though he was literally in his 80s, So I think learning from all the different people in the restaurant industry is probably the biggest thing you can take from it, because every single person, like in the restaurant industry, if you don't work hard, you're just gonna fail, and you just have to move on.
So what about toxic employee-boss relationships?
Yeah,
if you're in a position again where you're in an environment that's toxic to you, right? But you couldn't leave.
Mhm.
How would you decompress that environment like when you left it, and how would you manage yourself when you're in it?
I would pull a you on the mat, and I'd be aggressive and and confront. Because from what I do, I sit and I watch and I listen and I learn. And at that point, I would have had all the knowledge to be like, I can confront them, and I know for a fact, right, what is actually going on, and who else agrees, right? And so there's, you get to a point where you can, right, when you confront people like that, you're not gonna have severe consequences. right? Because
So you would have more courage to do the things that you're not comfortable doing, is what you're saying. Yeah, that's really hard. Matt, let's talk about some of the harder, like, stress and anxieties that you've had. How have you managed stress and anxiety,
Well, that's a good
or
question.
are you managing it?
Yeah, I feel like it's a constant battle with stress and anxiety for sure. Like, I think two were the times where one thing for me is that like achievement has always been something I'm striving for, right? Always
Yeah,
striving to do
value,
big
yeah.
things. It's something I've always valued. Like I want to go do bigger and better things. I want to achieve. I want to succeed, and that's something I feel like we all share very highly. Like we all want to be successful.
Very
And we all
ambitious.
want to. We are all crazy ambitious people. For me though, that had a really
You all much more competent and capable of that than your father. But keep going.
now, yeah. So for me, like, one thing I noticed, and this is started to become a trend that I realized once. It was probably about 2 years ago that I started recognizing this trend. But what happened is I recognized that the times I was most stressed and most anxious were also the times where I felt like I wasn't achieving or performing.
Okay.
And that was interesting. Like in
So
high school,
you've tied that performance to value, to your personal value.
So, well, this is what I recognize is like, so in high school, I was doing really well in water polo, had a good time, but busted my knee my senior year,
Right.
tore my meniscus weightlifting, and I couldn't play the same way I used to. I would hop in the pool and I'd have to keep my legs straight the whole time.
Yeah.
And I felt like a terrible water polo player, and my anxiety and stress went through the roof. And I felt like I lost a part of my like identity, self-worth too. And then I go on my mission as well, and I'm serving as a Latter-day Saint missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ in Ecuador, and I felt like I'm supposed to be helping a certain amount of people come into Jesus every month.
Yeah.
And the times where I wasn't doing that, I noticed were the times I was most stressed and most anxious, and that kind of got to me. Now, stress is, I think, inherently a good thing. It's inherently a natural thing to help us to motivate us to do things, right? Like,
right.
If I wasn't stressed about getting to work on time, I would never get off the couch and stop watching TV.
Right.
Right. But that can get out of control when we link that to our self identity, right? I think for me, it was a big problem. So when I started to recognize this is when I was out doing summer sales. I was out knocking doors, working these super long 14-hour days in the heat, getting rejected no after no after no. And there was times I was doing really good, but then I started hitting this spot where I was just doing awful. And my stress and anxiety went through the roof. I couldn't sleep at night. And that was also affecting my performance because I can't sleep at night. The next day,
Right.
I'm not as present, not as happy with my customers, and so I'm not getting many sales. And so I was like, Fetch, I have to address my stresses and my anxieties, or else I'm not going to perform. I'm not going to be able to. So I started talking to a therapist about it, and I had to disassociate my self-worth, my self-value, my identity as a human being, as a son of God, as a family member of this family, as someone who loved and cared by. I had to disassociate that with my achievement and success. So for me, it was like, I'm only worth something if I'm achieving something. But that wasn't inherently true at all. Like,
You used to believe that.
I used to believe that.
Right.
And I had to disassociate. I had to break off that belief in order for me to stop having these unsolicited stresses and anxieties. But
How hard is that?
That was a really hard process. In fact, like
I had like 2 decades of belief system.
Yeah, I had so much time with that belief system. It's still something I'm struggling with too. Like, if I don't go out and do what I say I'm going to do, sometimes that gets to me. But I've had to really disassociate. For me, it's had to be a lot of personal coming into. For me, I associate my self-worth now with not only my love from my family, but from from my God.
Yeah.
And now I associate my self-worth with coming unto him. And so for me, it's been a lot of diligent work in relying on God and
Mhm.
saying I trust him and loving him and doing things that connect myself to God so that I feel my self-worth rather than associating that with sales. And so like for a long time I was having to disassociate this, and I remember it got to a point where like there's this one time I was knocking doors and this guy right off the bat says, no, I don't want it, slams the door. I walk by and I just had to tell myself, nope, like that is not what makes me succeed. What makes me succeed is my ability to move forward, right? And afterwards, it's funny because after he closed the door and yelled at me, he opens the door again and says, hey, just out of curiosity, what's your success rates out here? And I sat there for a second, maybe like just 1 or 2 seconds, and said, oh, 100%. Like 100% success rate. You didn't sell me. And I said, my success isn't dependent on getting the sell or not. It's my ability to move forward. And I'm moving forward. And that was a big breakthrough moment for me. That was like a, wow, like I'm not a successful person because of this specific quota or this specific number. I'm successful by my ability to move forward.
Wow.
And the second I realized that too and stopped getting mad at myself for my failures and just getting happy for myself, my ability to move forward,
Yeah.
was the moment where my success also started to take a big leap forward. I started to perform a lot better. I think naturally we all do better. Like Isaac's a perfect example because Isaac doesn't have any stress or anxiety in the pool, at least in water polo.
Yeah.
And he performs amazingly. Like our stress and anxiety will debilitate us. And so if we can do things to get rid of the unneeded stresses, the unneeded anxieties that we put upon ourselves,
Yeah.
it's like this weight is just lifted off of us and we're able to go and perform better. And
That kind of ties into what we when we set the stage, how we define like reframing negative experiences into opportunities for personal growth. So Jacob, let's talk about that for you, right?
Yeah.
What are some things that you think you could reframe in your life? Let's just go up to the social or academic level. What are some negative things that happen? And maybe it's not specifically you, but maybe some things that you see common at school that people are going through that negatively impact them. But if they reframe them into a positive growth mindset, that it would make a big difference.
There's a lot of things. I think so. The people that I hang out with a lot, they are like, they have straight A's and students. That's most of the school. Like, they're very smart. Don't get me wrong, but having straight A's causes a lot of people stress.
Yeah.
Like horrible stress. And like,
why is that?
Because it's like one of those things where, I know one person where if she doesn't get straight A's, her parents are like, kind of, mean to her, not in a bad way, but they're like, you really need to get straight A's, and they like watch her on it, and that causes her to be like a lot worse of a person. Like not like mean, but like her to be more on edge all the time, have a lot more stress, not very like social and more always thinking great.
So do you think that she's focused more on do you think that she perceives her value to her parents is contingent upon the A?
Yeah. But I don't think her parents see it that way. I really don't. I think her parents are more like, hey, you really like. They say it in a rude way, but they really mean like you need to get straight A's because it's gonna help you a lot in the future.
So they see her potential and they're trying to motivate her towards her potential. She sees that my value is contingent upon achievement.
Yeah, and that's like just one example of many people who have that. Where
I think that's probably pretty common, whether it be academics or music or sports. I think a lot of parents who who would self-define as high achievement parents, like high achievement parenting style, probably fall into that trap.
Yeah.
Right? Did you guys see that a lot in school? Do you see it now, like in college or with your young married friends, or like with career choices? And
I mean, I guess it's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, people just naturally have pressure to want to do and be better, and like I think a big problem is comparison has become something super high. So like, you know, with how much social media is out there, and there's just comparison all day, and so a lot of people compare themselves to others, and they feel like their self-worth is crap if they can't get the straight A's or they can't get the body that they want.
Yeah, because you only see the good of what people are posting.
yeah,
Right? There's a social media influencer from St. George.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have heard this. And she's very popular on Instagram, YouTube. She's supposedly like Molly Mormon, right? She's LDS. And she's actually been torturing, starving her kids, locking them up. It's like you're only seeing the best of her family and her kids, and then all of a sudden her kids running down the street with no clothes on, and he's duct taped and bleeding from multiple pores and starving to death, and you're like, what the freaking heck is going on?
But we see that thing and feel like that's the expectation. Yeah,
so people are comparing themselves to everyone of what they see, when in reality it's such a mirror. It's like there is no comparison of what you've done in your life to what someone else did in their life, right? You look at
how do we get past that comparison? Like, what are some tools that you think?
I think it just helps to know that like other people are struggling too.
And just not to care. You look. There was a post of a picture of Elon Musk. He was out with his family on a houseboat, and he had no shirt on, and he was had white, and he's overweight. And everyone is roasting him about that. But I'm like, half of the people doing that probably look like that or worse. And it's like, why are you judging him? Like, I'm not in shape by any means. Like, I like, why do you care so much? And if I had that same picture, there'd be 3 people that see it. No one would care. But the fact that he is the richest man in the world makes everyone want to attack him for it.
Yeah.
And bring down his ego because they feel like, I want what he has, when in reality, if you look at what his life actually has and had, it's not like good of a life.
Stop judging people,
life.
you know?
Yeah,
like, if you're judging people, you're going to start judging yourself subconsciously too. And that's going to take you down a whole mental rabbit hole that you don't want to go through. You're like, if you're nitpicking about everything about someone's life, of course you're going to see the bad and the horrible. And if you're doing that to them, subconsciously, you're going to do that to yourself. And that's going to hurt. And like, that's a natural tendency we have as human beings. We want to be better. We want to feel good. And so we push other people down. But in the act of pushing other people down, you're gonna push yourself down subconsciously, and that's gonna screw you over. So
when you pick other people up, it changes your mindset, and you start to see yourself elevated too.
Totally.
Yeah, and you have to find the balance. Like, I could have still been in the restaurant industry and have success, but there is no balance when you're in something like that. And so, what is the balance for you? Right? I think
there's no balance for what you want, because you wanted a good family life too, right?
Exactly.
You wanted a lot of things.
Yeah, and so that's not the
balance you were seeking.
Yeah. So, what is the right balance? I think is what people should be asking themselves instead of comparing, right? Because a good balance for other people, influencers, is they make tons of money online doing social media, getting to spend time with their family, doing something like that. And by them like sharing their lives essentially with you, they now bring in other things. Right?
Yeah.
Like hate and criticism from everyone around the world.
Right.
You know, and so I think instead of doing that, it's like, okay, so they found what's working for them, what's going to work for myself. Do I need to be working out more? Do I need to spend more time with my family? Do I need to be at work more? like, do I need to be involved in what my kids are doing for their extracurricular activities or sports, right? What's actually going to boost your boost your
Self-esteem.
self-esteem and your happiness.
Yeah.
So we've got some family scheduling stuff that we got to tackle, but there's two more topics that I want to, I guess 3 more topics that I want to preach. 2 of them I think are pretty short. One of them we'll keep it limited. And that is the topic of suicide, right? Where we take where our mental health is in a way that, and it doesn't have to just be suicide. It could be any debilitating behavior, right? Whether it be addiction, suicide, anything else, right? So I know with me, I've had suicidal thoughts, right? Where I felt like nothing I did was working. Nobody wanted me around. That my ultimate goal was to bring you guys happiness, and that came through monetary means.
Yeah.
And so if I died and I staged it like an accident, then there'd be life insurance money for you guys.
Yeah, and if there is no life insurance money, there is no money.
Right. Well,
Just kidding.
no, but there is.
Yeah.
There could be, right? And so, like, that was my rational. My rational, like, A, they don't need me because I offer nothing, but at least I can offer that, right? We also know that beyond mental, like self-doubt, that sadness, that loneliness, there's also physical factors, concussions, right? Matt had some severe concussions. Our daughter had some severe concussions. Jacob, you had some experiences in school where you hit your head a couple times. You passed out at a party, not because he was drinking, people, right? But something happened, like you hit your head, and people just thought you were just laying down, but you were actually not conscious.
Well, there was one person walking by me, and like they woke me up. I was like looking at them, and they were just kind of like shoveling by.
But after that, combined with the anxiety you're having about academic performance, you were not feeling great about yourself, and you had thoughts, right?
Yeah.
Isaac, I don't know any specific thing with you, but earlier today you said you thought about it.
Yeah.
Right? How, like, one is, that's the first I've ever heard that from you. Matt, I knew about. Matt is more of an open book in our family than anybody else.
Yeah.
Jacob, I heard about.
Yeah.
After a late night discussion, you confided into Matt.
Yeah.
What can parents do to create environments where, like, what could I have done differently where you would have brought this up to me months ago instead of recently?
Well, you did say that you like. I was faking being sick a lot because I just didn't want to go to school. It was constant reminder. And you said that you like knew that like that I was faking it. I just wish you would have like brought up why are you faking it.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah.
So I think.
I kind of want to deep dive. I just want to reiterate this.
Okay, that's.
So I knew that Jacob was experiencing stress and anxiety, but I thought that was the extent of it. And I think what Jacob's saying is dig deep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I think, would you confront someone if you feel like that they're having a bad day, or you feel like they're suicidal, or like, is that something you would do personally? Because if you wouldn't do that personally, then you're not going to share your experiences with someone else. We did a social experiment with a friend in high school.
The answer is yeah. No,
Right, yeah,
that's a great question.
So if you're not going to do that, it's building confidence for that. But we did a social experiment for my friend's psychology project, and we dressed me up in nice clothes. It's not like I looked homeless. And I just laid in the middle of a mall or like in a very public place to see what would people do. 2 out of 100 people would nudge me on the shoulder, are you okay? So 2 out of those 100 people.
I didn't know this. Wait,
Yeah,
so you just
I
dressed,
have no idea.
you just dressed up super
Whoa.
nice and then just laid in the mall?
I just pretended I was passed out or something was wrong, and 2 out of 100 people actually said something. And which means 2 out of those 100 people would say something about themselves that they need help or they are going through situation, right? So I think it's something to be more aware of is
One out of 30.
what like who is going to speak up for someone else, and if they're not, you're not going to speak up for yourself, right?
So maybe start with having the courage to ask people if they're okay.
Yeah, I think
And that
that
might give
is
you
the right
permission
step.
to ask for
Yeah.
help when you need it.
I think that is the right step. Yeah.
That's incredible because I think this lady told a story about how she was on a TV show or radio show, and she said, "Go talk to your kids right now,
Mhm.
right, and ask them how they are." And a dad actually followed that advice, and he found his daughter in the act of trying to kill herself. And I don't think there's a parent in the world, if they knew that their child was about to do something permanent, wouldn't get out of their comfort zone. I know I would get out of every comfort zone I have,
Mhm.
or every inhibition that says, "Oh no, he's fine. He needs to work through this feeling. It's part of the growing. It's part of the adulting. Like it's part of the self exploration. Let him or her figure that out." I think what you're saying is we need to. That's bad advice,
Mhm.
and we need to just be upfront with people, and
Yeah.
as if they were
It's just time to start asking questions. That's all. It's what are the questions to ask? What are the right questions? When's the time? Right? There is no time to ask questions about mental health. It's always the right time. But just build the confidence, right? No one is confident unless they're behind a screen. People will ask you any question, they'll criticize you, do anything to you behind a screen, and you'll never know who it is. Right? And I think that is how our world has evolved, and it's just so moralizing that people can't in person. If you're literally like, "Hey, I'm gonna kill myself," people are gonna freeze up and be like, they're not gonna know what to do.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
You remind me of something. I was at a workshop yesterday where they were talking about money mindsets, and the lady made an interesting comment. She said, "Wealthy people have no problem talking about money with other wealthy people, or in general. They're always talking about money." And she said, "Poor people don't ever want to talk about money." And I thought, wow, that's fascinating. But now when you say this, mentally healthy people probably have no problem talking about mental health issues with other people. And that's a place to start. Is it's not about you, maybe about other people, because then now it starts to normalize the conversation.
Yeah.
Now, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts on it are, so I'm a global communications major.
Yeah.
And I like to study other cultures.
Yeah.
For me, it's very interesting because I feel like you have, by what studies show, you have cultures that tend to be more busy, such as like
U.S. culture.
U.S. Oh, well, I want to say the whole United States is included because the United States is very diverse, but in a lot of busier places in the United States and also in places like Japan or China or in places like Europe where there's this social expectation of keeping yourself crazy busy, keeping yourself super successful and working really, really hard, you tend to see a lot higher rates of suicide attempts and a lot higher rates of depression and anxiety. And what I think is interesting about this, and something I think is a big contribution to this, is not only setting super high expectations for everybody, but I think it's part of our culture where we just constantly need to be busy. There's no time for campouts with your son. There's no time for just sitting around and talking about life. like my experience of being in Ecuador and in Mexico and other places is that when you're walking around, it's normal to see an old grandpa on the porch sitting down with his son, who's my age, who's also sitting down with a daughter or niece, or like it's normal to see people sitting around and just talking, communicating. And for me, that was honestly a big culture shock. And here in the United States, I'm like, you don't walk around the neighborhood and just randomly show up at someone's porch and say, "Hey, how's it going?" and just start having a conversation with them after never having a conversation. It's completely normal. If you were to walk up to someone on their porch, you'd be like, "What are you doing?" Like,
So in our busyness, relationships suffer.
Relationships
And
suffer
when
a lot.
relationships suffer, I'm going to interject on this.
Mm-hmm.
Loneliness spikes.
100%. Yeah, and loneliness is like there's been studies. Loneliness is one of the biggest contributors to our not just our emotional health, but our physical health. Like they've done studies with older people, and like your physical health will decline rapidly. I heard somewhere, this could be totally false, but I heard that like the number one contribution to people aging rapidly in their older ages is dependent on how lonely they are.
So I just want to kind of recap this so we can move on.
Yeah.
Dig deep.
Important to dig deep.
Normalize the conversations.
Mhm.
Build good relationships.
Yeah. Spend time in the relationships.
So I think as fathers, parents, friends, it's okay to dig deep when we have that inclination. It's okay to always be talking about it, and we need to have those relationships. Those are essential. I think that's incredible advice, and all of what you guys have said supports the myriad of things that I've learned over the last, I don't know how long, and especially recently from a ton of mental health experts. And this is you guys not being experts, just life example and experience. Bless you, Jacob. All right. The last two topics. That was the deep one. The last two ones we're going to kind of summarize. And so I'm going to throw out the question, give you a little bit of space, but I want like a 1 to 3 sentence answer. What can parents do better to foster a more open space to talk about mental health, anxiety, stress within their families? And it could be things that we didn't do, it could be things that we've done, it could be things you've seen other people do, things that you wish had happened, but that you hope will happen in all families, so that way you don't lose it. Like Hallie lost her best friend to suicide, right? What would Hallie give advice to all parents so that doesn't happen to somebody else?
I think, from the great words of Billy Joel, it's all a matter of trust. Right?
Wait, what song is this?
A matter of trust.
So, the two Billy Joel fans, also Billy Joel fan, not as
It's not as intense, I guess.
I think it's all trust. There's nothing else. If you have no trust with your parents, then you're not going to be open. And if your parents don't have trust with you, then they're not going to ask, and they're not going to reach out.
Another thing is like, a lot of the times I've heard like sometimes the hardest thing to say is the first word. So say the first word. Like you get comfortable with saying that first kind of thing in the conversation.
like the youngest kid drops like the best wisdom.
Yeah, that's true.
You're like giving him a face of like, what?
That was just such a profound statement. That's like such like a tweetable thing. Like the hardest thing to say is the first word. Say the first word. Like that's like such a great soundbite, Jacob.
Yeah. I put that on a backdrop with like a mountain, and it's my Microsoft screensaver.
That one guy saw with the vacuum cleaner.
But yeah, and in my mind, it's also get off the couch, be aware, be present, be there for your kids. It's so easy to escape in this world. Like we live in a place where there's so many distractions. I can escape and be on YouTube all day. I can go and flood myself in alcoholism, pornography, anything. I could even just get myself addicted to sports and watching TV and or like honestly, like sometimes our biggest strengths or our biggest like accomplishments will also like hinder us if we prioritize that number one. If I'm prioritizing work number one, if I'm prioritizing sports number one, if I'm prioritizing other things, like honestly, just spend time for it, make it your priority. Align our priorities will shift over time, but if you make family your number one priority, no other failure will compensate for failure in the family and failure in the home, and so just make it your priority.
No success will compensate for failure in the home.
Something like that. There's a quote somewhere out there.
Yeah.
Someone said it. But in my mind, like any failure that you have in the home is not going to be even close to as devastating or as, I don't know, any failure you have outside of the home will be a lot more easy to deal with than any failure you have in the home. Any failure you have in the home will be a lot harder.
Yeah.
But
That's great.
yeah,
I think some of the things that I wish I had done. So my wife and I celebrated 25 years of marriage recently, and I think some things that I wish I had done differently was a lot of things you guys are saying. I wish I had been more dedicated to be present with you when it was time to be present. Obviously, there's times to work, and there's times to like buckle down and be like, I got to do this, right? And sometimes there's even projects where but that's where the good communication. Hey, family, I'm checked out for the next 2 weeks. I'm sorry, right? But that's okay if they know that you're present the rest of the time when you're fully there, right?
Yeah.
So I wish I'd been present a lot more often. I wish that I had been more patient and more kind and not been afraid of being, some people will call it feminine energy or feminine traits. That's not the same as being female or girly. It's just softer skills. But I think I wish I'd been more willing to invest in kindness when I was young versus harsh. And then things that I think we did good was I think we did have some hard conversations. I think that we had the experience with a cousin that she confided in Matt about something that had happened to her, and I think because we were transparent as a family, despite that other stuff, you could come to us and talk about some very serious.
Yeah,
things.
I never felt like I couldn't go to you guys about anything.
You just wondered if I was really present and aware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was the concern. Like you were always open enough, and you were always willing to talk about hard things. You never shied away from hard things,
Yeah.
and that was.
I think not
That was a
judging
blessing
is
for me.
something that we've done well, right? So I would say that. So wrap it up. I just want to give also some protocol for you individually. So we've talked a lot about family relationships and stuff. A couple of things I just kind of want to wrap up for our listeners and viewers. One, this is universal stuff that it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to hear this stuff. You got to get good sleep, people. You really do. There used to be cultures, especially among men, that working late hours was an indicator of loyalty and success. It's not. Lack of sleep is an indicator of burning out, right? Don't burn out. Get good sleep, right? Gratitude. Being grateful for what you have spawns positive thoughts and growth mindset versus wishing you had things or regretting you had things is negative and it brings you down. So be grateful, right? Diet. Pay attention to foods that make you feel bad and the foods that make you feel good. We're all going to be different. We're not all the same. So pay attention to what makes you groggy and lacks motivation. Take care of that, right? So those are some definitely universal things. Move your body, right? When you move your body, whether it be a simple walk in the morning or intense exercise, you're releasing chemicals and endorphins that give you positive boost. So those are some top 4 things. And I would add a 5th thing. I could probably add like 10, 15 things, but the 5th thing is take time to decompress, wind down, pray, meditate. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you people. If you're struggling, those are things you can do immediately. No cost things, no barriers to relationships on breaching new relationship dynamics that you can do right now. So anyways, I just want to close. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Jacob, for being vulnerable, being willing. Thank you to the people who listened, that have spent all this time listening to this podcast. We appreciate you, and hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your
it's been
feedback
awesome.
on this. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. We'd love to have more subscribers. Please share this podcast with your family and friends. And thanks again. And
Yeah, and just like one last thing, just remember that Abraham Lincoln said that 25 hours of sleep a day will keep the doctor away. So,
all right, remember that. All right, you read that on the internet.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everyone.